Muy buenos días para todas y para todos.
Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be with you today on International Care Day, and we'd like to welcome you to this webinar offered by the IDB and IDB Lab. The conversation will be in Spanish.
To listen in English, you can select English in the interpretation button in your Zoom. Se quiser ouvir em português, selecione português no botão de interpretação e seu Zoom. And that way you avoid listening to me in Portuguese. Soy Diana Rodríguez, asesora especial.
I'm Diana Rodriguez, a special advisor on gender diversity to the IDB president, and I will be moderating today's virtual seminar. To begin with, we'll hear a few remarks by Fernando Regalia, Social Sector Manager at the IDB.
Muchas gracias, Diana.
Thank you very much, Diana, and a warm welcome to all of you. I'm really pleased to kick off this virtual IDB seminar on International Care and Support Day, which is observed tomorrow. 2 years ago, the IDB began to support the countries in the LAC region in building care systems, starting in Uruguay and then significantly expanding thanks to the regional commitment and to your own commitment. This year, IDB included care systems among its institutional and operational priorities through the launch of the IDB Cares initiative, through which we also seek financing, technical assistance, knowledge, and a supply of high-quality care services, also fostering a co-responsibility. For the IDB, investing in care is an economic growth opportunity for a number of reasons. First, it enables greater female labor participation by freeing up time for female caregivers. Most of them are actually women, and the evidence is conclusive. In Uruguay, investing in the 0 to 4 segment of age increases female employment by up to 5 points. In Ecuador, we see the increase in the female labor share by up to 22 percentage points. And studies in Argentina and Brazil also point to similar results. This reality also applies to care for older persons. In Mexico, a bank study shows that caring for parents diminishes the probability of women aged 50 to 64 need to work by over 2 percentage points. And among those who are already working, it reduces the number of remunerated work hours by 7%. Investing in care also contributes to long-term human capital accumulation, generating savings in health systems and improving the quality of life for those who receive care, whether they be children, boys or girls, persons with disabilities, or older adults. In today's seminar, we'll be looking at the challenges and opportunities to put in place care systems in our region. We will be focusing on one vital aspect, which is acknowledging and supporting human resources, the carers, both men and women, who provide vital support to those who need it, so that they may perform daily activities, have a share in social activities, and live full lives. I would like to thank the OECD and the French Development Agency, who co-authored the report on Who Cares, how to support and ensure recognition for caregivers for older people in Latin America and the Caribbean. We hope that this report will truly be a milestone and will provide a useful tool in the future dialogue around the development of care systems in the region. I would like to especially recognize Gloria Reyes, the Managing Director of the Superior Program in the Dominican Republic, and Mrs. Aponte, a federal representative in the Brazilian state of Pará. They are regional leaders who are joining us today and whose work has been instrumental in driving this agenda forward in the region. The challenges are manifold, but we think that the opportunities are far more numerous. So I would like to invite us all to continue to reflect on and work on this agenda to which we are strongly committed as a bank. Thank you very much indeed.
Muchas gracias, Ferdinando.
Thank you, Ferdinando. This webinar will consist of two parts. In the first one, we'll learn about the main results of the new IDB publication, Who Cares? How to support and ensure recognition for caregivers for older people in Latin America and the Caribbean, which was carried out in collaboration with the OECD and the French Development Agency. In the second part, we'll have a top-notch panel, during which we'll be discussing the challenges and opportunities faced by care systems in the region, and as already previewed by Ferdinando. We'll be joined by Director Gloria Reyes from the Dominican Republic and Secretary Leandro Dal Ponte from the state of Paraná in Brazil. And I would like to join Fernando in expressing my recognition of these two leaders on the matter in the region. We will also be joined by two IDB specialists, Karina Lupica and Marta Rubio, who will certainly offer a lot of input based on their extraordinary work on care policies in countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, in addition to all of the work they've done already. I would like to give the floor to the great team that wrote Who Cares? You have the floor.
Muchas gracias, Diana.
Thank you very much, Diana. People in Latin America and the Caribbean live longer than ever. This is a major achievement, but it also increases the demand for care. We estimate that by the year 2050, 23 million older adults will need long-term care in the region, which means 3 times as many as today. Yet, the care systems in the region are not yet ready. Public services reach few people. The not-for-profit options are overburdened, and private care is often unaffordable. There remains a lot to be done, and one key step to face this challenge is to acknowledge carers, ensure the recognition, support for them, training, and also recognition for this essential task they perform. Therefore, the Inter-American Development Bank, the OECD, and the French Development Agency joined forces to produce this publication, which first offers the most comprehensive analysis to date on people who care for older persons in the region. Secondly, it looks at policies and programs that support them. And finally, highlights lessons learned, good practices, and innovative approaches that may inspire reform in the region's countries, as well as in other OECD countries. Well, first, we look at the situation of family carers for older persons, both men and women. In the region, we have 25 million of them, most of them being women. In addition, it is women that shoulder the most demanding and less flexible tasks, such as feeding or bathing the older relatives. Carers, on average, dedicate about 7.5 weekly hours to provide support in connection with day-to-day activities. This burden is 2.4 times greater for women than for men. And this unpaid work comes at a cost, both in health terms as in terms of financial autonomy. 71% of family relative carers report stress, 55% report loneliness, and 34% depression due to the lack of self-care and support. People who provide unpaid care have an 8.8 lower probability of having paid work. And if they do have paid work, they usually work fewer hours, which translates into lower income and into lower old age pensions. This result is due to the impact on female employment, whereas the impact on male employment is much lower if it happens to exist to begin with. If nothing changes, the demand for family carers for older persons in Latin America and the Caribbean will rise to 60 million people by the year 2050, which will account for 13% of the population in working age. And if we look only at the 45 to 64-year-olds, which is the age around which it's common for children to have to look after their parents, this will account for 32% of this group. And this trend will also increase even further in decades to come due to lower birth rates and also due to changes in housing arrangements. We now also look at paid carers, both men and women. There are 3 million of them in the LAC region. 95% of them are women who are often around 40 years old. Over half of them are Afro-descendants, and only 8% of them are migrants, a relatively low figure if compared to OECD countries. This sector accounts for 1% of total employment and 2.3% of female employment. But in some countries, it goes as high as 5% of female employment. All of this in the context of precarious working conditions. Paid carers work on average 31 hours a week, which suggests that this is a job that is often part-time. Informality and the lack of social security are prevalent. Only 26% of paid workers contribute to social security, and only 1/3 of them have a contract. Paid carers usually earn less than a minimum wage, 90% on average. Working as a paid carer also comes at an emotional cost. 20% of them exhibit signs of depression and 45% of them suffer from stress. One important finding is that these symptoms can be relieved by means of training. Unfortunately, however, remunerated carers do not have enough training. Less than half of them have completed a caregiving course, and only 25% of them have completed an extensive course spanning more than 150 hours. Due to the rapid aging of the population, By the year 2050, Latin America and the Caribbean will need 14 million paid caregivers. Due to all of this, it is critical for the region's countries to invest in developing caregiving human resources, also leveraging the huge potential this sector offers to bolster economic growth.
Veamos justamente qué están haciendo los países
And
de la
let's
región
look
para apoyar
precisely
a
at
los
what the
cuidadores
region's countries
familiares.
are doing
Aquí
in
nos hemos
support
centrado en
of
4
family
tipos de
caregivers. Here we have focused
políticas de
on
información,
4 types of
y de
policies:
asesoramiento e
information
formación,
policies,
apoyo económico
advice and
políticas para
training,
combinar el trabajo y los
economic
cuidados.
support, and
Con
policies to
respecto al
combine
acceso a la
work and
información,
caregiving.
vemos
Regarding
que
access to
los países
information,
están
we see
invirtiendo en
that
el
countries
acceso a la
are
información para
investing in
mejorar el
access to
bienestar y la calidad
information
del
in order to
cuidado.
improve the well-being and
Varios países
quality
tienen
of
campañas
care.
de
Several
han hecho
countries
campañas de información,
have launched information
como
campaigns,
es el caso de Ecuador, que
such
tiene la
as in the case of
campaña
Ecuador,
Cuida
which
que te
has
cuide.
the
Costa Rica
care
también
for those who
tuvo
care
Cuídate para
for
cuidar bien,
you
que
campaign.
tenía una
Costa
campaña y
Rica
un
has
portal de
another one, the
información en
Cuídate
línea.
campaign,
También
which also
existen
includes an
registros de
online information
cuidadores, como en
portal. There are
Chile, para
also
un acceso
caregiver
preferencial a los servicios.
registers. This is the case in
Además de
Chile
la
for
formación,
preferential access to services.
los
And in
países están
addition to
invirtiendo en
information, countries are
formación
also
y
investing
asesoramiento.
in
La mayoría de
training
los países
and
ofrecen
advice.
cursos
Most
gratuitos de
countries offer
formación
free
o
of
de recursos
charge
en línea,
training
aunque son
courses
muy
or online
heterogéneos.
resources,
Hablamos, por
although
ejemplo, de
these are highly
140
heterogeneous.
horas,
We are looking at
un curso
140
muy completo en Chile, pero
hours,
en
a
muchos
very
países
comprehensive
también
course
hay
in Chile, but
cursos
in many
mucho más
countries,
cortos de 15
there are
a 20
also
horas
much
que se
shorter
centran en
15 or
temáticas
20-hour-long
específicas
courses which focus
como
on specific
cuidar a personas con
topics such
demencia, al
as
final de
caring
vida.
for people suffering from
Y
dementia
Chile
or end
también
of life
tiene un
caregiving.
subsidio
And
para la
Chile also
asistencia
has a
para
subsidy
favorecer justamente esta formación. Sin
to
embargo,
foster
los
this
servicios
kind
de
of
asesoramiento
training.
y
However,
apoyo psicosocial son mucho
advice
más
and
escasos
psychosocial
y
support
existen de manera
services are
más
much more
puntual.
scarce and
Aquí
exist here
igualmente
and there.
vemos el caso
Here again,
de
the
Brasil,
case
donde
of
en
Brazil.
Bahía hay unas
In
sesiones de terapia en
Bahia,
grupo,
there
que
are
también
group
existen, por ejemplo,
therapy
en Perú y
sessions, and we
Colombia a
also
nivel
see
nacional.
that in Peru and
Reducir el
Colombia
impacto económico
across
también
these
es
countries.
muy
Reducing
importante,
the
ya que
economic
muchos
impact is also
cuidadores
important,
tienen
as many
que reducir sus
caregivers
horas de trabajo o
need to
dejar
reduce their
su
working
empleo.
hours or need
Sin
to give up
embargo,
their
la
jobs.
mayoría de los países
However,
no tiene ese tipo de políticas.
most of these
Existen,
countries
por
do not
ejemplo, en
have
Chile,
such policies.
para
In Chile, for
las
instance,
personas que cuidan a personas con
there
discapacidad, o en
is
Costa Rica,
some
centrado
of
en los
this
hogares de
for
bajos
people who
ingresos
care
y también
for
hay
persons with
iniciativas locales.
disabilities, or in Costa
La
Rica for
dificultad aquí
low-income
siempre es
households, in addition to some
encontrar
local
un
initiatives.
equilibrio
The thing
entre
is to
favorecer a los
find
cuidadores formales,
a
remunerarlos
way to strike a
para
balance
evitar estas
between
pérdidas económicas,
recognizing
pero
remunerated
también
caregivers to
mantenerles
prevent economic losses,
indefinidamente o
but of
durante el
course,
largo plazo en el
having
papel de
them
cuidador.
forever
Otra
or
manera de apoyo
for the long
económico
term
son los
in
créditos
the
de
role of
pensiones, que
caregivers is a
tienen
challenge.
un
Then
impacto
there are
mucho más a
also
largo plazo, ya
pension
que
credits,
la idea
which
es
have a
evitar
very
esas
interesting impact
pérdidas
too.
o
The
un
idea
riesgo de
being to
pobreza
prevent these
por
losses or the
interrupciones
poverty
laborales que luego se
risk due
acumulan en
to
las pensiones. En la
work
actualidad no
interruptions,
existen
which
en la
then have an
región,
impact on pensions.
aunque se están
Currently, there's
considerando
no
y
such
sí
thing
que
in the region,
existen
although
para
these
interrupciones
things
por
are
el
being
cuidado de
considered,
niños en
and
4 países.
there
Y
is
luego,
provision
con
made
respecto a las
for
políticas
work
que
interruption
permiten
due to childcare in
combinar
4 other
los
countries.
cuidados y el
And then there are
empleo,
policies that
las
allow you
licencias
to
por
combine
cuidados
caregiving
son
and employment.
escasas cuando
Leave
hablamos
for
centradas en estos
caregiving
cuidados
tends
para
to be
personas mayores, donde
a
solo
few
existen
and
en
far
Chile, México y
between
en Ecuador,
sort of thing. We
o para
find some of that
familiares
in Chile,
enfermos
Ecuador, and
que existen
Mexico
en otros países. Eso
for
implica que, bueno,
long-term
en
care
otros
and
casos
for sick
se tenga que
relatives
hacer
in some
uso
other
de unas
countries,
licencias
which means that
generales como para
often you
uso
need to use
personal o de
the
emergencia.
general standard
La
leave,
flexibilidad laboral
such as for
también
personal
es
use or
escasa
emergencies. And
cuando hablamos
labor
de una flexibilidad
flexibility
por
doesn't
razones de
abound much
cuidados, donde solo
when
se
it
considera
comes
en
to
Chile,
the
en
need
Costa
for
Rica
care.
y en Perú.
You see some of that in
Finalmente,
Chile,
también es
Costa Rica, and
importante
Peru.
los
Finally,
servicios de respiro que permiten
also
una
respite
pausa en los
services are
cuidados.
important in that
Y
they offer
esas
a
opciones
break
también
from caregiving,
por
and
ahora
these
son escasas.
are also
Existen, por
rather
ejemplo, en
scarce
Chile,
options. They do
donde se
exist
considera
in
2
Chile,
visitas por semana de un
where
asistente personal,
there's the offer of 2 visits a week with a personal assistance. And in Bogota, they also have these support services. We also see support in or progress in support policies for paid caregivers, and this focuses on 3 types of policies: labor rights, health and productivity, and skills. Regarding labor rights, what we get to see is that most countries don't necessarily have specific regulation governing this sector. This tends to be more the overall regulation, but there are some specific instances. For example, the minimum wage for caregivers. This is the case in Costa Rica, Uruguay, or for collective bargaining in Argentina and Uruguay. Then there's labor law protection. But due to the high degree of informality, it is difficult to actually exercise these labor rights, and this also gets in the way of collective bargaining agreement progress in terms of rights. So what countries are doing is to foster formalization by placement services and training, such as is the case in Argentina, where there has also been a tripartite agreement for domestic workers, but it also includes the caregiving sector in terms of wages. Also in Jamaica, where they offer incentives for formalization through Social Security. And regarding health and productivity, the safety rules and standards help improve well-being by lessening attrition, both emotional and physical. There are some measures for safe management, although they tend to focus on the residents, yet there is an impact on the well-being of caregivers too. And these measures are more focused on institutional care rather than home-based care, and they tend to focus on maximum quotas, the ratio of residents, and you see some of these standards in effect in 10 countries. Implementation may also be weak, on the other hand, due to the lack of inspection capabilities. Productivity enhancement measures are not a priority in the region for the time being. And here we see 2 types of measures. One has to do with developing the use of technology to increase productivity. This is what we get to see in Chile, Uruguay, with the use of alarm necklaces or bands, and also improving socio-sanitary coordination is something recognized in the caregiving strategies in 5 countries. Where we do see significant efforts is in skills development and with a view to aligning skills with demand. And what countries are doing in this regard is to define occupation or job profiles, which means that they are doing a job description, which is based, for example, on the experience of caregivers, but also take into account how this may be affected by the degree of dependence. And we see this in 10 countries already, and in another one, this is in progress. Also developing overall skills. There are some skills frameworks in some 8 countries, which may lead to putting in place some nationwide training curricula. And of course, what skills are we talking about? This may differ from country to country, but it may include teamwork or perhaps providing training on how to provide care in connection with day-to-day activities, also skills training. And it's true that many workers in the sector haven't undergone formal training, so it's important to recognize previous experience which has been gained over the course of work. And this is available in 6 countries. Based on this intersectoral approach in the report on the region's countries, Latin America and the OECD, some thought was given to the way to go to improve the living and employment conditions for caregivers and to tackle the human resources gap that will arise if this is not done, for which we must foster comprehensive policies aimed at improving the quality of long-term caregiving work, scaling up training opportunities while ensuring the mainstreaming of people-centered caregiving approaching, providing support for unpaid workers as well. We also need to better share the burden of work between men and women while empowering caregiving resources in order for them to be able to deal with emergencies caused by extreme events. In order to improve the quality of employment, we need to first professionalize the sector by improving worker access to social security through such policies as tax incentives and also oversight and regulation of self-employment. We should also foster private sector initiatives to improve the quality of jobs, for example, through developing cooperatives or fostering caregiver platforms. This on the slide is a platform in France which centralizes information and facilitates the management of labor relations between employers and caregivers. Here on the right-hand side, you can see a picture of graduates who've completed a caregiver training program in the Dominican Republic. It's also fundamental to invest in training and courses through programs that promote the quality of care with a people-centered approach, adapting as well to the needs and preferences of caregivers with flexible and affordable and accessible courses. We should also support family caregivers who are usually the ones with most of the caregiving responsibilities. The idea being to provide them with accessible information. And here we have an example of a French government portal for older adults, which addresses specific concerns and provides guidance to people based on their own needs. It is equally important to provide psychological support by offering them some respite options and the opportunity to better combine their labor and family responsibilities, trying to find ways to provide them with compensation for the economic losses arising out of caregiving tasks. Fourth, it is essential to bring men on board as family caregivers and also paid caregivers. And we need to find ways to attract them to the sector, for example, through affirmative positive measures to hire male workers. This has led to some positive results in certain countries. Finally, older persons are particularly vulnerable to the effects of extreme climate or weather events, natural disasters, and health emergencies. And the long-term caregiving sector and its workers need to be prepared to deal with such shocks. Thank you very much. And I would like to invite you all to read the report on Who Cares. Thank you very much, Marco, Ana, and Carlos, for this valuable publication, which I would also like to invite you to read, as this is the sort of data that drives our policies and helps us speed up progress on the matter in the region. And we have just
¿Aló?
hello there.
Se bloqueó.
No, todo bien, Diana.
Es que acá empezó
Everything
a
is
sonar
fine.
audio, disculpen. Acá
I
pensé que era de todo, pero
started to
perfecto.
hear funny noise here, but we're good then. Okay, I was just saying,
hemos estado oyendo en este tiempo es
based on what
cómo
we've
proveer
heard,
los cuidados
it's
y al
about
tiempo
how
asegurar
to
el
provide
reconocimiento
care,
y
while
las
at the same time
condiciones
ensuring
dignas de
recognition and putting in place
es uno de
decent
los mayores
conditions for
desafíos que enfrenta
those
nuestra
who
región.
give care. And that's one of the
Y
key
esto a su vez
challenges
tiene
our region faces.
implicaciones
This, in
profundas para
turn,
las personas
has
que reciben
profound
cuidados y
implications
para las
for people
economías en
who
general.
require care, and also for economies as a whole. Ferdinando talked about the impact on care and productivity and jobs, and this book shows how we need to better value this work and to recognize the importance of investing in this kind of work as a development driver, and also to provide some essential humane conditions. And now we'll look at ways in which the region's countries are building their caregiving systems, including not only older persons, but also other population segments like children, persons with disabilities in need of support. So we will now move on to those concrete experiences, look at lessons learned, and also look at some of the prospects going forward. I would now like to welcome all of our panelists, especially for those who weren't here at the outset. I will once again tell you about our top-notch panel. We have Gloria Reyes, the General Director of Progresando con Solidaridad Supérate, a program in the Dominican Republic. Also with us is Leandre Dal Ponte, who is a federal representative, and she works for the Office of the Secretary for Women, Racial Equality and Older Persons in Paraná, in Brazil. We also have Marta Rubio Codina, a specialist on early childhood development at the IDB, and Karina Lupica, a specialist on gender and diversity at the IDB as well. So we will try to provide some quick food for thought. Let's start with a question that may seem simple, but isn't. In a very short time, just 1 minute. Tell me what you think, each of you, is the greatest myth or misunderstanding surrounding care, and why? Gloria, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Diana, and thank you to everyone. Congratulations for the publication. In the case of the Dominican Republic, the care is provided practically exclusively by families, and especially women in the family. What's interesting, which we've learned in recent years from these communities, is that it's not just women, it's also girls. And that is something that was flagged. It was a warning, and we reached out to families to try to change this care model, which now relies on women and especially girls within the family. That's a very good point, the fact that it's up to women or girls to provide this care within the family. Secretary Leandre, let's hear from you next.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation. Diana, it's a pleasure to be here with you. I believe that the greatest myth we still have to overcome is that care is not only affection, it's a strategic public policy. Looking after, caring for people, it's a collective commitment that involves the family, the community, but also the public power. And we see caring, when we see it as an investment, we strengthen bonds, and we provide services for those who need it the most.
So again, it's not just girls and women or young people. It's not just the family, it's the community and also the government at the state and national level. It's part of our collective engagement. Karina? Good morning, Diana, and thank you very much for inviting me to be on this top-notch panel you're moderating today. Greetings to my fellow panelists, as well as to others who are joining us remotely as part of this very friendly and honest conversation. I can only agree with Gloria. I would say that the fundamental factor when it comes to care is that it's a private family responsibility and that it falls naturally on women. We found that it was enough to be a woman to be expected to know how to care, and this had very negative consequences. Women were overextended with work. They could not hold a job. or have economic independence. And it also made this type of work invisible. And why do I call it work? Because care calls for support, and also it has a value for those who receive this care, as well as for society as a whole. If providing care is not recognized as a job, it's going to be very hard to formalize it, to make it more professional, and also ensure that it's properly remunerated. Caring is to care for lives, and this is essential. We need to see it as not just something a family has to do alone. If we do that, we are going to deepen or heighten social inequalities because families who have more resources will be in a position to pay for higher quality services. So we need to change these myths. We need to have policies that provide a better distribution of responsibility. This is essential not only for those who receive care, but also for those who provide it. Thank you, Karina. And you made a very good point about making this work visible and making it appreciated or valued. Marta? Thank you very much, Diana. Good morning to everyone. I agree with the myths that have been identified by other panelists, and I'd like to add one more, which is prevalent when we look at early childhood, but it also applies to other populations that may need care. Care is not just physical or safety, feeding, bathing, changing diapers, feeding. We need to have a more holistic view of care. For example, enabling individuals to remain independent in the case of children, also promote their cognitive and language and social-emotional development. So care, it's not just about taking care of physical needs. It means that we also have to take into account social and emotional aspects as well, whether it's in older persons or in children. It's important also to help them to remain independent. I think that is another thing we should include on the care agenda. Thank you. I could not agree more. It's not just what we see, physical needs and safety. We also need to consider other aspects. And now, given these challenges and given that we know that care is essential for development, what we see in Latin America is that it's fraught with innovation when it comes to care. So let's start by exploring how countries are developing care models. And let's also focus on some of the examples of innovation. Gloria, in Dominican Republic, you have implemented a care system through the care communities, as you call them. I had the pleasure of hearing you speak about this some months ago, and I'm very happy to invite you to tell us more about that as part of this webinar. So let's start with two things. What are the care communities? What do they consist of? And what advantages do you see with from starting at the local level? Well, let me start with the advantages. Engaging communities at the local level in policies of this sort clearly fosters a better understanding as well as greater ownership on the part of families, the community, and everything these policies entail. So we are able to get the communities to ensure that these projects remain sustainable. And it also makes it possible for us to challenge stereotypes, which is good because it brings more job opportunities. It's important to involve communities. When we develop the strategies at the local level, we bring in families, social groups, community groups, grassroots groups. That makes these actions, it facilitates these actions because we are able to find resources locally. the burden is no longer just for families, it becomes a joint responsibility. In practice, what this has meant is that there are individuals who become more interested in doing what you said at the beginning, to see this as a job, and people start to gather information to find out what we offer for children, for older persons, or disabled persons. So the idea is to generate a way for families to obtain more resources and to engage individuals in providing professional care. We want it to be seen as a job, a paid job. And all of this, in our case, has been the key to success. We have the communities, we have the families who are receiving care, and we have the state offering services, financing these resources. And we're able to outsource the hiring of caregivers. It has enabled us to strengthen the actions at the local level with the support of the state. Excellent. I think that engaging different stakeholders has been successful in providing visibility and also in helping us challenge and change the stereotypes. Secretary Leandre, in Paraná, you have also opted for a territorial approach, and that has been very interesting. The national government is working on its care regulation. At the same time, you've been working on your territorial approach with the Paraná program, Friends of Older Persons. So it's interesting to see how actions are taken at different levels in order to provide for actions at all levels. How has your program been beneficial to a population that is aging very quickly?
Well, Diana, this successful experience stems from a very clear vision. Aging is something that's happening. That's why we developed a project, a program that coordinates with 369 municipalities. All municipalities have councils and universities and the civil network in order to establish a network to care for elderly people. It's a territorial approach that allows us to see local realities from large cities to small towns and adapt actions according to the needs of each municipality. This program strengthens already existing structures, health, social service, and it brings initiatives just like the state-level network for caring to the elderly people, the national or the state-level register for caregivers, and works financed by the state to prepare cities, because as people age, they have to be better protected. We also have a certification system. The cities who are friends of the elderly, in order to have a state policy and not only a government policy or a given administration policy. So Paraná acknowledges the value of the elderly, promoting its independence, protecting them against violence, and we're building a future where living well is a synonym of good quality of life in any corner of the state of Paraná.
Thank you very much, Karina. From your regional perspective, given that you see the entire region from the vantage point of the IDB, what other models would you like to describe, and what can we learn from them in addition to what we've just heard from these two great examples? Thank you for your question. We are supporting a number of countries of the region in designing regional care systems. In August, following your leadership, we held the first Bicuida Forum in Mexico. 9 countries of the region attended, including Dominican Republic and Brazil, who are also part of this conversation. There were also other countries, and they presented care centers in Chile, Semillas de Futuro from Paraguay, also Siempre, a program in Uruguay for early childhood education, which is carried out in coordination with the private sector. So in addition to mentioning these individual programs, which are wonderful, and which I would invite you to look into, I'd like to share some lessons we took away from the forum. One is subject of care policies. Programs no longer refer to people needing care. They also speak of the well-being of caregivers. That is why most countries are implementing leave programs, cash transfer programs for unpaid family caregivers. Some countries are pioneers. They recognize this unpaid work as part of the social protection systems. A second lesson we took away from this forum is that the challenge now is how we scale up regional approaches without sacrificing quality. Why do I say this? Well, because the models have been successful, they've been impactful, but if we look at the target population and the population receiving care, we see that there still are gaps. So how do we expand coverage without sacrificing quality, without ending up with something we don't want, which is a fragmented system, either by territory or by population group? In addition to that, we learned that training and working conditions of people working in the sector are essential to ensure quality care for those who need it. But they're also important to improve quality of life and the well-being of caregivers themselves. They're often overextended, burnt out, and they face other serious issues. Another wonderful lesson we loved to hear about is that countries are making strides in developing administrative or management tools that make it possible to better coordinate procedures, budgets, and also allow for long-term planning. So what are the tools? For example, dependence indicators, budgets that consider care. For example, single window platforms that provide easier access to care by grouping data or facilitating procedures. Based on all these lessons, the IDB will continue supporting these regional dialogues. We are convinced that if countries share their lessons, the region will make more headway and will do a better job in finding practical and concrete solutions that include the quality of life of all those who live in Latin America and the Caribbean.
Muchas gracias, Karina.
Thank you very much, Karina.
Quiero volver a
Gloria, let me come back to
preguntarte sobre,
you.
hablando sobre resultados.
And speaking of results, I think that is what other countries or governments of the region find attractive. It's what gets them to engage in this sector. What results have you seen in communities where services are already in place in terms of coverage and also social transformation, which is another excellent thing you mentioned? How do you measure impact? The truth is that the pilot focuses on 2 specific communities, Asua in the southern part of the country and the other in Santo Domingo, and they've both begun to produce very clear results. With the pilot, we focused on the first care, which was for elderly adults, individuals who've received training to provide care for older persons and for girls and boys with disabilities and also children in general, young children. So there's been more than 4,000 individuals who have received formal training. They now have the skills and they have their certification and can work as caregivers. The other thing we have seen in working with older adults, carers for older adults, now we have licensing. So people need to have a license in order to be hired. As I said before, the model includes outsourcing of services, and we have been able to work with a number of organizations, associations, and cooperatives. Also, firms, they are now working with us. We have more than 400 families now receiving care at home thanks to the program. So that is the impact we see. That is how we change the quality of lives of caregivers. They have paid formal jobs. They earn a steady wage, which is another way of formalizing this type of work. And also, this guarantees the right to care for older persons. Many of them were living alone. They were being cared for by the community, by their neighbors. And now we have families who have elderly persons have access to care through the program, and that has been a huge benefit for them, for their quality of life, which is important, but it's also made it possible for caregivers to have access to have a quality job. They can be hired and trained to become a caregiver. Women still account for 97% of those who are trained by these programs. Only 3% are men. So we're still working on this. We want to generate more interest on the part of men in these jobs, and we are approaching communities. And we're starting to see a change. We're promoting this as a job that it's not just for women, it's also for men. So those have been the results of the pilot so far. For 2026, we will be scaling up the program in the city of Santo Domingo, which is the capital. We have identified 5 priority sectors with the support of our social registry. It's identified the levels of dependence in these families, and we will be formalizing training for individuals in these communities with the support of local care groups. So that is an overview of the results we have seen so far. Excellent, Gloria. Thank you very much. Leandra, let's go back to you. How are you strengthening the capacities at the municipal level? How are you shifting from local policies to state policies? And what challenges have you encountered in trying to make these policies sustainable and working with other municipalities?
Well, our focus has been to strengthen management and local governance, because people live in cities and they know the families, the surroundings. So we have been training local teams, providing diagnosis tools, technical support. We develop a mechanism to for incentives. For instance, we have the municipalities who are friends of the elderly. We have the certification, and we have also implemented a financing system. It's unprecedented, with funds for all municipalities. so that they can fund public policies implemented at local level. But what we still intend to do is to integrate sectorial policies, social service, human rights, etc., and to change mentalities about aging. But I believe that we are making progress, especially thanks to partnerships that bring ongoing information, engagement of local leaderships, and when the municipalities feel part of this network and they recognize they are being supported, policies no longer remain on paper and they start changing people's lives.
Muchas gracias, Leandre. Y ahora me gustaría
Thank you very much,
orientarle
Leandre.
la pregunta hacia Marta.
Now I'd like to turn to Marta
Personas que requieren cuidado,
and focus on individuals who need care, like boys and girls.
¿cuáles son los mejores modelos de atención para
What are
la
the
primera
best
infancia?
models of early
¿Qué has ido
childhood care?
encontrando y ayudando a ajustar, Marta? ¿Y qué elementos son clave para que
And what
para que
elements
pueda
would
haber
you
una
say
implementación
are
exitosa
essential in order for them to be successful when it comes time to implement them? Thank you. Traditionally, we have seen two different types of care when it comes to early childhood development services. One is those provided by daycare centers or preschools, which could also be community centers, and the other are family support systems, home visits to families, or group activities in community centers where we engage with caregivers, mostly mothers, sometimes grandmothers, and we're seeing men join in as well. As a result of the pandemic, there's been the emergence of many alternative schemes, some remote and others that are hybrid. We have very little information about how effective they are. The format that works will depend on the place. As the panelists have said, different roadmaps may work for different places, also access to families, how close they are, and also the age of the child is another important factor. We want to promote development and independence, and all of that is sometimes requires that there be different levels of interaction. Now, how to scale up these initiatives successfully may be complex, but it's doable. It's been done in different ways, although it's still a challenge. It's important to find a balance between following the original model, which may have been tested on a small scale, and adapting it to effectively implement it at a larger scale. So we need to find which elements are non-negotiable, and we need to understand the realities at the local level and see how the modality can be adapted. There also has to be consideration given to cultural aspects, and there also has to be an understanding of how it's going to be delivered. Is it going to be delivered by caregivers at a center or facilitators working with families? These don't have to be professionals. They could be community members who work with families, but it is extremely important for them to receive training and to have proper support, as the panelists have emphasized. So it's important to find the right models that take into account the local context. That is one of the key elements that is non-negotiable. So it means not only looking at technical skills, but also working with those who are going to implement and deliver the services at the local level.
Certainly, the takeaway is the importance of the territory and of understanding the needs and differences across Latin America and the Caribbean. If you think about the different populations, the urban centers as opposed to non-urban, and the importance of looking at these two models that are addressed in an integrated fashion. Leandre, to close this segment, we have focused on the territory and on the models. I would like to ask you, and perhaps point towards the multilateral development banks. What is the role our international institutions have to play in supporting these territorial initiatives? What would you say? I don't know if you were able to hear, but I can repeat the question just in case. The question is, what is the role played by international organizations in supporting these kinds of territorial initiatives? And well, we have the OECD and others here.
Well, in the case of IDB, it's been a key role, especially in regards to Paraná, because it has given us the opportunity to create policies and looking at international experiences as benchmarks. We do not have a lot of expertise when it comes to care providers policies in our country. So this has been an important progress in Brazil because this new regulation was approved in late 2024 with a new policy that was passed. It's a challenge nationwide in Brazil and mainly when it comes to local communities. So Paraná state already has a program, a state program, and we have 12 million citizens, and among which more people over 6 years of age, and we will have these figures soon in the short term. And now with the support of the IDB and other international organizations, we will find the answers we do not have yet. We'll have the opportunity to design new models in our services, to seek for new funding sources, since it's one thing to ensure care based on citizens' rights. It's a different story to build public policies and to allocate funding that is provided by a regulation that is guaranteed, even though the policy has not been fully implemented in Brazil. If we do not come up with strategies and systems for caregiving soon, we will most certainly be facing a lot of judicialization at a federal, state, or municipal level even. Therefore, we have a very positive experience now with the IDB as a partner. The IDB has helped us in assisting our citizens through our public policies, and it has made a big difference. Things need to happen fast, at a faster pace. And through this partnership, we have been having this opportunity to be able to promote everything that we're doing that is so valuable, and to turn it into a strategy so that we can provide care to those who are in need, and at the same time to provide care to caregivers. And we have to consider caregiving as knowledge, as something that brings about prosperity. We don't want to leave anyone out.
Thank you, Leandre. And I would like to link back to that last point you've made on how care is indispensable for the economy and for growth. And as you talked, you referred to one of the myths or misunderstandings, this idea that it's just out of charity, out of love, because that's what naturally comes out of families and especially with women. And I would like to come back to that point because talking about care is fundamental in order to be able to talk economy and to be able to face the major challenges that Latin America faces, the lack of growth, productivity, permanent poverty, inequality, which is abhorrent. So, Karina, I would like to come back to you. So let's talk about the economy. Many people are not familiar with the concept of time poverty. Could you perhaps explain to us what that is and how it ties in with the financial and economic autonomy of women? Certainly. Sorry, my apologies to economists. This is a political scientist talking economics, but I will do my best. Let's start by defining what economic autonomy is about. It is the ability people have to generate and dispose of their own income. How is this done? Normally through participation in paid work, as the labor market is the widespread source of income generation for people. According to ECLAC data from 2023, only 1 out of 4 women had their own income in the region, as opposed, sorry, 1 out of 10, as opposed to 1 out of 4 men who had income of their own in the region, which speaks to the fact that despite the progress made by women on the labor market, it is still important to foster their participation in the labor market. Now, this can't be conceived of in isolation vis-a-vis the sort of caregiving work that women continue to carry out. In the book presentation, there was reference to the fact that women take part in caregiving work, and they spend 3 times more than male counterparts. When women devote themselves to care work, this is not just good for the care recipient, it's also good for the market. Why? Because without caregiving work, there would be no labor workforce available, well-fed, and in a position to work. So there's a big link here between the market, caregiving, and the economy, and that's not often taken into account. And when women shoulder unpaid caregiving work, they free up time for other people to take part in the job market, like men. But women are often trapped in what has come to be known as time poverty. What is time poverty? It's the limited time that women have to participate in the labor market because they are the ones almost solely responsible for family care work. So in order to overcome this dilemma, we need policies that reassign the burden of care across markets, state, and families, and within families, between men and women. This is what is termed the social redistribution of care, or the new organization of caregiving. This will not only benefit women as such, who will be able to have more time to take part in the labor market, but it will also bring benefit to their own families, as there will also be substantial income in terms of the financial well-being of families. But investing in care is an economically strategic investment. According to ILO, in a recent study, if we invest in care services, by 2035, we can generate almost 31 million formal jobs in the region. This becomes an unprecedented opportunity to increase the labor participation of women that would go up from 53% currently to 63% by 2035. Certainly, without doubt, investing in care benefits people and is a fundamental human right which underpins the families and social well-being, but it's also a strategic investment that will benefit us all as a society. And Leandre, I would like to come back to you. How are you envisaging the economic value of caregiving work, both paid and unpaid, as part of your public policies?
Well, caregiving has a huge economic value, and more in particular in Brazil. It has always as we've heard, been given by women, by female caregivers. And in the state of Paraná, we want to acknowledge this work as part of the caregiving policy, the economic policy, and with the program, the the family caregivers policy, grant policy has been an important step toward acknowledging that funding is important, that they are entitled to compensation. Now we go beyond that. We take a step further. We are providing them with conditions for these caregivers to also obtain training. We want to create job opportunities and income, generate income for these families, and acknowledging caregiving as an investment, in our opinion, here in our state, means equals to generating prosperity, reducing inequality, enhancing the quality of services that are provided for those who are in need, and mainly to make sure that aging is a synonym of care, of quality of life, of respect. This is our rationale in our caregiving policy. We need to provide care to those who need it as a right. And at the same time, we must value caregivers to entitle them with their rights. And here, this is where the government plays an important role through public policies that will foster improvement. In Brazil and the state of Paraná is the same. Families have always been the main caregivers. And now, with this new structure and new family arrangements, the state needs also to take a role as the provider, the caregiver, in a different way. And as I mentioned earlier, I don't know if that was clear, to prevent processes that would lead to lawsuits, for instance.
Thank you much, Leandro. Gloria, back to you and to the Dominican Republic. You've set up cooperatives which are led by women as part of your home-based care model. Why do you choose that sort of approach, and what impact is this showing? Well, in general terms, we decided that care should be sustainable over time and that it shouldn't be strictly dependent on changes in the political orientation of the country. And a way to strengthen this sort of economic activity was precisely by becoming involved very actively as productive sector and organizations, in this case, businesses, many of which are led by women. So our vision was that this should be a way to encompass several economic dimensions to the economy of care by setting up cooperatives and MSMEs, and also through women's organizations that had traditionally been active within communities, and they started an opportunity that could really bring benefits to these communities and to these women through a new economy, through fiscal incentives for these care communities. And these structures are familiar with the territories. They can foster local employment, and they can also partner with the state without actually depending on a traditional public entity. So there's a major synergy there that allows us to create jobs on the one hand, to boost the economy, and also to offer the country a new production window. The potential of the economy of care, as calculated by the Economy Ministry, suggests that in the next 10 years, through this policy of care, we could get 40 to 80,000 women who are currently taken up in care work. If they free up the time they dedicate to caregiving, they could become integrated into the productive market, create their own economic resources, and there's a potential for more jobs as well, based on all of the activities within the economy of care. And of course, ensuring that the caregivers, both men and women, are formally employed, that they get training and a stable source of income. As soon as that changes, the invisible work paradigm changes through recognition, through professionalization. So in this model, we see a highly virtuous element that allows us to regulate caregiving services, but also encourages the private sector, encourages the creation of businesses, MSMEs, cooperatives, where women can become actively involved, while at the same time creating this balance which links us to the ground, to the territory, to services, and also ensures that families can directly receive the benefits, ensuring the sustainability of these interventions over time. Thank you very much, Gloria. We are a little short of time. So at this point, I'm going to move on to Marta, and I would like to start wrapping up this segment. Marta, based on your experience, how does early childhood care contribute to economic growth? How do we argue the case, which sometimes seems to be sort of overlooked? And how does that contribute to equity as well? Could you perhaps share a few data? Feel free.
Creo que perdimos a Marta.
I think we may have lost Marta. So let me go back to Leandre and cover a few other topics that I think are also important. I would like to focus on what we think are the key services offered to older persons in Paraná, which have made a difference. And why do I ask you this question? It's because there are many, many different things we could do, many ways to deliver care at the national level, at the local level, starting with population groups, with caregivers. But based on what you've done in Paraná, what would you say have been the key or essential services?
Well, first and foremost, the program of state-friendly of the elderly is a set of integrated actions that affect people's lives directly. And the main services we have been developing, and I could mention as a reference, the caregiver allowance helps value those providing the services. And then we have social complexes that offer, or social centers, offering different activities to promote the elderly people's independence and autonomy. And together with that, they can have the daycare center that can be a breather for family members who look after the elderly. So they can take the elderly person to that daycare center and they can have a breather. It's a state that values the issue of the... We have housing models for housing centers for elderly people. They are equipped with the appropriate infrastructure, and these housing centers have other services in addition to simply housing. And another program that has had a very good direct impact is the promotion travels for people over 60. They are able to go to tourist areas of our state in organized group trips, and that's financed by the state government. And we have Open University for the elderly. These are spaces for learning, for socialization, and also for their expression, because The elderly can discover new skills, they can exchange experiences, and they keep on writing a history with purpose and with joy. I understand that these actions have a lot in common. Take care and dignity to where people are, closer to them. Caring and respect to this population that has been increasing by the day here in the state of Paraná.
Thank you, Leandre. I'd like to go back to you, Gloria, and ask you what lessons do you think other countries could borrow from Dominican Republic, countries that are just starting to develop their systems? Just as I asked Leandre, what is something you would like to highlight? What do you think is essential based on your experience developing programs for older persons? Which lessons would you share with others based on your experience in the Dominican Republic? Well, over these past 3 or 4 years, what I would say are the major lessons we have learned and could be replicable in other countries is that first you need to have a mapping, a diagnostic study that enables you to know your care needs at all levels, starting at the macro level, looking at regulations, and also at the micro level, looking at households at the local level and roles within the family. So we need to have information about the communities, as we said earlier today. Secondly, we have to engage communities and all their structures. In our case, the intersectoral associations have been essential to combine efforts to tackle regional challenges and also find solutions that are aligned with the specific realities of each community. Our different territories may have similar cultural patterns, but at the micro level, there are some unique dynamics. And I think all of this needs to be taken into account when defining actions or making decisions. And the other thing ties in with the second point, and it's important to bring in different sectors. So you need to have interoperability among public institutions. There need to be partnerships. And as we said today, we need to partner with multilateral organizations and engage other social agencies. We have to be open to private sector participation and that of academia. That's important for learning. And it can't just be the state. We need to have a flexible framework that is collaborative so we can factor in the social, economic, and many other aspects involved in providing care. One thing I would underscore is that there's a very strong cultural construct when it comes to providing care and the role of the caregiver and of the person receiving care. If we have information about all these elements, we can overcome barriers that impede progress when it comes to these public policies. So those are my 3 thoughts, the 3 lessons that I'm happy to share with all of you. Thank you very much. That was very clear. And I'd like to close, Karina, with a question for you. In your opinion, what would be the most important next step to strengthen the care systems in the region? I'll be very quick. I would say that right now we have more than 10 countries in the region working on national policies or systems of care. So the systemic approach is gaining ground. What does it mean? It means that speaking of care, it's not just speaking of services, even though services are a key component. We need to consider training, quality, generating data for strategic planning or evaluation, etc., etc. And with care systems, we are covering all the populations that need it and also the caregivers. So what are countries working on now, which I would say has been complicated, is governance and financing. We can no longer rely on public resources given the fiscal constraints many countries are grappling with. So we need to take two things into account. The territory, as was mentioned in the presentation, there needs to be ownership when it comes to programs, and the programs have to consider local circumstances. And second, we also need to start thinking about the regulatory framework that will make it possible for this progress to move forward so that won't be any backsliding if there's a change of government. Thank you very much, Karina. Given that we just have a few minutes left, I'd like to give the floor to some of you to answer the questions that have come in. Oh, Marta's back with us. So if you have questions for Marta, you can ask those as well. Gloria, in the chat, Diana Segarra is asking, what can we do to motivate the population to provide better care for older persons in the home? How can we engage other stakeholders, or is this something only the government can do? I'll let you start. I would say that in order to raise awareness in the population when it comes to care, we need to be creative and we need to be intentional. This has always been seen as the family's responsibility. So we need to change that chip. We need to generate a different awareness. This is a shared responsibility. There's a role for the government, there's a role for society, and for the family. They need to work in coordination. So we need to communicate this intentionally. We need to connect with local networks. We need to promote the involvement of state agencies in the design process, working with community and local organizations. That's very important. Then there's the need to have a communication and education campaign for the community. So we need to find influencers in the community, people who can be spokespersons and who can help raise awareness. And thirdly, in order to succeed, it is also important for politicians, for representatives in Congress to be involved in this. In some systems, the initiatives start out in the Congress, in others, they start out with the executive branch. So policymakers and decision makers must also be on board with this coordinated effort to begin to raise awareness, to promote an understanding, and also to have coordination between the executive, the central government, and what is happening in the legislature. Sometimes there are parallel tracks that don't always converge. So it's important to have coordination, because if we don't, that can lead to difficulties down the road. Thank you very much. And we know that we lost Marta when we were asking her a question earlier. So I'd like to ask you in 1 minute, could you tell us how do we handle the challenge of investing in early childhood? Thank you. I apologize for that technical glitch. Well, we are lucky. We have had the support of notable economist. Jane Saplan is a Nobel Prize winner who has spoken about or studied early childhood and the importance of investing in quality services. They need to be well targeted. That's important. The return can be as high as 13.7% per dollar invested, one of the highest social returns we can find. So investing in early childhood care, it's been documented that this is an investment, and we can extend that to the rest of the care sector. And we also need to look at the cost of inaction. What happens when we do not invest in targeted, high-quality services? We see that in the region, these resources are 1.6 of GDP. If we don't invest in early childhood, we then see developmental gaps. These are developmental gaps, as Karina said, that then translate or lead children who have language gaps before they reach school age. So by the time they get to school, they cannot make the most of their learning experience. So this means that we are not helping overcome the generational poverty barrier. Thank you very much. We're going to hand over the last 30 seconds to Leandre. So all we have left is 30 seconds. What is the most important next step as we move forward?
Well, first, financing, ongoing financing, and dedicated management, because you cannot implement a public policy without money, without funds. And priorities can be translated into budgeting. You know what the priorities are when it earmarks public finance to implement those policies. So the major challenge, especially in Brazil, we have to draw up a law giving or considering care as a priority, and the main important thing, or the most important thing, is financing.
That will be our closing remarks. We have come to the end of our time. Thank you so much to Gloria, Leandre, Marta, Karina, and all those who have been a part of this webinar. Also to Marco, Ana, also the French Development Agency, the OECD. They've been key partners in this. And thank you to Fernando Regalia for his opening remarks, and especially for his work as manager for the social sector and for his support for the care sector. We ask, who cares? ¿Quién cuida? We care at the IDB. You matter to us, so we will continue working with you. We will support you to expand and scale up your programs. Thank you so much.
Gracias.
Rápidamente, los invitamos también a seguir la página de
Very
IDB
quickly,
Cares.
please look at our IDB Cares page. We could not end without this plug. We have a great deal of information. Karina will also be posting some things.